I know.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the May meeting of the Community Advisory Council. Oh, sorry, I'm on another month. We're in June today. Today is June 11th. This is a June meeting for the CAC. It's been a while since I've ran a meeting, so sorry about that. We're gonna call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. and we'll go around the room and introduce ourselves. I will start. I'm Lorena Barrera and I'm representing District 3.
Nancy Pemberton, District 5.
I'm John Alden, I'm the IOLERO director.
I'm Michael Soto, I'm the Chief Deputy Law Enforcement Auditor with IOLERO.
Welcome, Michael.
Thank you.
We'll do some more introductions.
Yeah.
later.
Yeah,
My name is Frank Kidder, Lieutenant with the Sheriff's Office.
Yo soy Imelda Martínez y soy del Distrito 5.
I'm Imelda Martinez and I'm from District.
John Azevedo, District 4.
Alberto Botello, Alberto.
Michael Miller, District 4.
David Jones, District 2.
Nathan Solomon, District 1.
Robert Jers, District 1.
Lisa Camacho with IOLERO.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 8, approval of the May 14th meeting minutes. Are there any questions on the draft minutes? Is there any public comment? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion to get the minutes approved?
So moved.
Thank you. Nancy, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, John. All in favor?
Hi.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions?
Abstain.
You said what?
I abstain.
You abstain. Okay, thank you.
Abstain too. Yeah.
Thank you. The motion carries. Moving on to item 3, openings and appointments. So we do still have openings in District 2 and okay, just in District 2 right now. And
Can I add something there? Supervisor Rabbit reappointed me for another 2 years. I don't know what detailed stuff has to go through the board or whatever, but I've received a letter from him appointing me for another 2-year term, so.
okay,
That's great.
thank you.
Make sure
Congratulations.
that you and Zed are in touch about any other paperwork. And that is a reminder to anyone else who's on the CAC that if your term comes up, you can be in touch with Zed and your supervisor about the renewal process.
Okay, thank you. And then we do have a new CAC member, Michael Miller from District 4. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself? Welcome.
Thank you. Well, I'm glad to be here. I was sworn in about 30 minutes ago. And I was a police officer for nearly 10 years, from 1974 to 1984 in San Mateo and San Francisco. I then worked as a carpenter, various things at night when I went to law school. I've been a civil trial lawyer now for 38 years. Still have my business here in town. Law firm downtown. I worked downtown in Santa Rosa as a lawyer since 1987. And all these issues interest me greatly.
Thank you. You're welcome. We're happy to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 4, oral reports and comments, and we'll start with the sheriff's liaison report.
All right, well, good evening, everybody. I'll start off with the community engagement report. The last month or so, the sheriff's office, including the sheriff himself, has attended approximately 14 events. Some of those events include the Becoming Independent fundraiser. There were a couple West County events where we engaged the folks out in West County communities, the Great Fire Pancake Breakfast. And then the one that CEO Wood was very excited about was the Rio Nito Post Office ribbon cutting ceremony. And when she was excited about that, I asked, why are you excited about that? And she said it's actually a super big deal. Because the post office also has a community room attached to it, is my understanding. Gonna be a place where the community out there in Benito can really come and interact with one another. Exchange information, share concerns, that sort of thing. And so I asked, I said, well, where did they get their mail before? Because I know Burnville's the next closest big town, and that ends up, that's where they used to have to go to get their mail. So now they've got a post office. It was opened up, if my memory serves me correctly, in an old firehouse. And I know it's a big deal for everybody out there. We have at least one employee that works with us that lives out there, and she is super excited as well. So pretty big deal for that community. I'm sorry, I'll slow down. I know, I'm not quick. There was the Community Academy concluded in the last month. Got great feedback from the attendees there. And we're gonna roll right into the Youth Academy, which starts next Monday. For the youth of the county who are interested. It's 5 days this summer. It's the 16th to the 20th from 10 to 4. My understanding is that it's full. Actually, I'll be presenting there on the 18th for the professional standards unit, which I'm sure they're involved with. The Wright Charter School Open House was a tabling event for the sheriff's office. There were a couple parades that we attended, the Healdsburg Twilight Parade, as well as the Pride Parade. CEO Wood told me that we were well received at the Pride Parade. There was about 2,000 people in attendance. Had great conversations with a lot of folks out there, so I guess she was excited about that. There were a couple of Rotary Award banquets, one in Roanoke Park, one in Santa Rosa. The one in Roanoke Park highlighted one of our deputies who received the Heroism Award. While he was off duty, he observed smoke coming from a residence, went and checked on it, and ended up saving a woman's life who was inside the house and couldn't get out. Again, while he was off duty. And it just kind of shows the commitment to duty that law enforcement officers have, whether they're in uniform or not. Super proud of that award for deputy immunity. There was another fire and earthquake expo where we emphasized preparedness. And then with the opening of salmon season last month, there was a big concern about ocean and boating safety, especially off the coattails of the multiple tragedies that we had at the opening of crab season, if we all remember back in November, I think it was. So our boat unit collaborated with various agencies and entities, including Linda Hopkins' office, the Coast Guard, in order to raise ocean and boating safety awareness, created flyers, and then when our marine unit was doing inspections, would provide that information to the folks that were out there on the water or were planning on attending the opening weekend of it. My understanding, it was one of the busiest weekends they've had on the ocean in a long time. And fortunately, the sergeant of the Marine unit reported that it was one of the most calm days he could have ever had on the water. It was like a lake, so there were no issues, which was great. And then the last little bit of information I've got, it's based on everything that's going on in our world, really, or at least our nation, some ICE-related information. In case anybody's concerned, if nothing has changed in the sheriff's office regarding ICE-related procedures. I did contact our ICE coordinator, who is the person who's in charge of the statistics. And so last month's statistics, there were 37 requests for notification of a release from ICE. there were 16 requests for information from ICE, and I asked what types of examples that would be and how they differ from the notification. I was told oftentimes ICE will inquire about an incarcerated person's release date, or maybe the custody status. And then sometimes they also receive a notification, however, the incarcerated person has already been released. And in that instance, we don't even respond to that, but those are the types of inquiries that are considered requests for information as opposed to requests for notification, if that makes sense. And there were only 3 responses to notifications last month, and there were 0 arrests. And then she also told me that an area of concern that commonly comes up when she has to do presentations is oftentimes people will ask, well, how does ICE even know when a person is in custody? Is the sheriff's office reporting that information to them on their own? No, the answer is no. We do not contact ICE on our own accord. ICE is likely notified via biometrics, specifically fingerprints. And I was told the process, every incarcerated person is fingerprinted. Those returns are forwarded to the FBI and Cal DOJ. The FBI is the entity that shares that biometric information with other federal agencies, and we cannot control what the FBI shares. At least that was a question. That's about all I got.
Thank you.
I have a question, or do we wait until all the reports? Okay.
So for the IOLERO director's report, we have a bunch of things that happened over the last month. One of them is, you may recall, about a year ago, we went through the budget process with the board of supervisors and got approval to create and then also fill a new position at IOLERO, which we're calling the chief deputy auditor. Now, that's a person who not only does some of the auditing that the other auditors do, but supervises the team of auditors. So now we have budgeted 3 full-time and 1 part-time auditors. Or as they say in budget land, 3.5 auditors. And I'm pleased to say that the chief deputy we've now selected, hired, onboarded, and he's now here sitting to my right, Michael Soto. And I wanted to give Michael a few minutes to talk about himself and sort of introduce his background, and so you can get to know him.
Thanks, John. Hello, everybody. I've met everybody except council members from District 1. Both District 1, Mr. Thomas, so hopefully after the meeting we'll get to chat with you. But not offended if it's late either, right? Yeah, so my name is Michael Soto. I started a couple weeks ago. Been going through the onboarding process. I officially got offered back in January, so it's been a lengthy process to get through background, which is understandably so because of the nature of the information that we deal with. It's a lengthy background investigation process, and that ran its course. And I'm up here now. My background, most recently, was a police special investigator, which is similar to the auditor position here at IOLERO with the Los Angeles Police Commission. So doing oversight of LAPD, very similar function to what kind of would be Inspector General. Did that for 4.5 years. Prior to that, brief law enforcement. Before that, 9 years as a public defender, Orange County, LA County. I actually got my start in oversight with the LA Sheriff's Department as an intern before I went to law school. I was, for a year, I interned with the ACLU, Southern California, blocking the roads to the jails as a civilian monitor of jail conditions, which is still an issue I feel. So that's kind of, I live in Long Beach and I'm working hybrid schedule up here halftime, down in Long Beach halftime. I also serve as a member of the a commission that's similar to CAC for Long Beach. I've been doing that for, in its current form, it's been a year. Before that, for 2 years, it was more of an adjudication commission, so we would get complaints and adjudicate them. We had our own team of investigators, and we would make adjudications and pass that on to the city manager to follow or not follow our recommendations and our adjudication recommendations on misconduct allegations. It transformed, it changed us last year into a very similar model to your more advisory. In steering committee for the oversight director, which is basically their idea. That just recently got created a couple of years. So I'm still a commissioner on that, so I sit in your chair, just like you do, as a community member. Representing concerns of community members to the city and to the department. I'm excited to join the team. Excited to do community outreach, to supervise a really strong group of auditors that we have. We have another one's good that's done. She's got a start date and will be at full capacity pretty soon. So I'm looking forward to that. Other than that, I want to do too long an introduction, and I'm more than happy to talk off the record and chat as long as I'm looking forward to meeting you all, get to know you all, get to know your community, and helping support you and looking for feedback from you.
Thank you.
And that includes the sheriff's department as well, not just the community member, all the state.
Glad you're here.
Thank you.
This week, we also had the county budget process. Budget hearings concluded yesterday. You may recall that IOLERO has in Measure P funding floor that is the equivalent of 1% of the sheriff's office budget. So budget hearings are not that eventful for us compared to some other agencies whose funding might fluctuate greatly. Again, that's a floor, and we generally haven't gone much over that floor except by just a few dollars. So our budget, could be bigger. It's not a ceiling, right? But we've been managing to operate within that budget for a while. So our budget did not substantially change in this last cycle. We did put in a request to get some additional money for a triennial audit that's required by Measure P. I talked about this at a previous meeting. That ask and almost every other ask that went to the board of supervisors were all rejected this year. Politely, but the concern at the board, and I have to say, I think from a county perspective as a whole, this is very wise, is that we really do not know how much money the county is going to lose from the federal government this next year. The board was concerned that that creates a lot of uncertainty about funding for the whole county, for all of our operations. So they tried to be very, very conservative about authorizing spending this year. And we'll probably wait until the fall when we have a better sense of federal budget fallout to see what other changes we might want to make. So for this reason, the county has a lot more money reserved than it normally does at this stage of the year. We just don't know what's going to happen. I'll give you just a couple examples of the very surprising tack the federal government has already taken with respect to county funding. So, for example, there is a Federal Aviation Administration program that provides money to repair or upgrade landing strips or tarmacs at airports. Normally, that's a very routine funding mechanism, not controversial, not complicated. Gets offered all the time. Once a landing gets to a certain stage of repair, the FAA will give you some money to fix it up. I'm told that this time around, the federal government has said that that money can only be released to the county of Sonoma, to the airport, if the county is also willing to sign under penalty of perjury that it does not have a DEI program and will always participate with ICE whenever requested. Now, I don't think either one of those two things have anything to do with an airport runway. But that is an example of the kind of fairly extreme funding conditions the county is now facing. So, and that's puts us in the place as a county of having to either comply with state law or get federal funding. And that's obviously a terrible place for a county to be. Every county in California has the same problem right now. So it's gonna be a tough year financially for the county. So as for our audit, we'll have to think about whether or how we can do that through some other funding mechanism, or see if there's some other savings we can accomplish in our existing budget. I don't have an answer to that yet, but this was just yesterday. Keep you posted. We're going to NACOL. We talked a little bit at our last meeting about how we might not send quite as many people from the CAC to NACOL as we have in previous years. We really like to prioritize people who have not been before. So I think in the next few weeks, we'll send out an email to all of you asking who's interested and giving you more details about when and where. And then we can prioritize based on who's interested. And we'll keep Nancy and Lorena, your vice chair and sheriff, in the loop on that, so we can talk to them about it too. There are more people that are interested than we think we can send, and we'll have further conversation. So for outreach, we had a lot of exciting outreach events recently. Several of us, Robin, Lizette, Lorena, and me, were all at the Pride Festival. Gosh, that was a week and a half ago now. And had a great time there. Really great crowd, big crowd, you know, really lots of people coming over and talking to us. It was a great event. We have more outreach events coming because, you know, in the summertime, there's a lot of outdoor events. And we try to get to a lot of those. One of them is the North Bay Organizing Project does an annual event, which will be this weekend. And so I'm going to go to that on Saturday. We have had a lot of other outreach events, and I want to give Lizette some time to talk about whichever ones were her favorites. And then also talk to you about some outreach events that are coming and about that salmon colored sheet you see over there for signing up to help us out.
Thank you. I did email you all the same sign up sheet. We have this Saturday in Windsor, they're having a Latino Fest / Father's Day celebration at the Windsor Town Green. 4 to 9, they're gonna have vendors and other community organizations there. I also have Wednesday Night Market, June 18th, which is next Wednesday. You can please sign up. And the last item on there or event is the Petaluma Fair, June 19th to the 22nd. It's 12 to 8 or 8:30. Please sign up. Thank you.
You go to a county fair?
Sorry.
Let's sit on the county fair.
It's too long. It's like 11 days and I can't handle that. Thank you.
Any other reports?
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Regarding public correspondence, we haven't received anything new that the CAC hasn't already viewed from the public. So now we'll open it up for questions from CAC members. You had.
Yeah, I did. I wondered if the youth academy, does that have that is as one of that's goal their goals to like recruit youth? I mean, do you have a sense of that?
You know, I do is specifically because a friend of the family who is in high school reached out and is interested in law enforcement. And that's the first place that I turned to was,
Okay.
hey, why don't you attend this youth academy? It really gives you an insight glimpse of the inner workings of the sheriff's office, the different units that are available. And not just the you know, the fancy ones, right? It's the, I mean, again, I gotta go give a presentation, professional standards, to these individuals. And so it really gives them and exposes them to what a career in law enforcement, specifically in the sheriff's office, would look like. So, I mean, is it a recruiting tool? I mean, that's not the primary
Mhm.
focus of it.
Yeah.
It's really just for education and
Mm.
reaching out to the communities to have and educate them so they know, you know, what goes on at the sheriff's office.
Mhm.
But I mean, quite frankly, actually, I had a conversation with Misty about this. Pretty much anytime we're having a conversation with somebody, there's potential that there's a recruiting
Mhm.
aspect to it.
Mhm.
Oftentimes. Sorry. I mean, just going to family events, I get people that I
Yeah,
don't
right.
necessarily know that are friends of a friend or friends of a family that come up and they start talking to you about it. So
Right.
every interaction could potentially be a recruiting opportunity,
Mhm.
but that's not the specific goal of the academy. It's really more for education and exposure.
Mhm.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you. And John, I had a question for you about when you said that, that, the, you know, government funding is attached to, always participating with ICE. And we know that Avello flies out of, you know, Santa Rosa. Is there any ever possibility that they could say, you know, that they would use, that we would have to allow, you know, Avello to use their flights out of Santa Rosa for deportations or anything like that? Do you know?
Don't know the answer to that. There are a lot of questions for which we don't have answers right now.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that had come up and you knew anything about it.
I have not heard about that one. I picked that example because I thought it was so stark.
Yeah,
Right,
well,
And appalling.
yeah, but I also, there's a lot I don't know about the airport, and I don't know the answer to that question.
is there a way to find out about what this means when they say that we have to participate with ICE, you know, in terms of the airport? It doesn't have anything to do with the airstrips,
Yeah,
but I'm just curious about,
apparently we're seeing language phrased in a variety of different ways in many federal funding mechanisms like grants or direct federal funding from the budget for specific projects, or even federal funding that's been just ordinary and ongoing, like benefits that are given to people, like Medicare, right?
Mhm.
So these requirements to cooperate with ICE basically on demand are showing up in all kinds of funding contexts, and usually with slightly different wording. Sometimes they're in grant applications, sometimes they're in documents someone has to sign in order to receive federal funding. Sometimes they're just in policies from federal agencies that provide funding. Sometimes they're in federal funding that goes to the state, which then trickles down to the county.
yeah.
So it's showing up all over the place. And again, since California has pretty strict state laws that prohibit local agencies like cities and counties from using resources to collaborate with ICE beyond what would be very strictly required by, say, complying with a subpoena or a warrant. It puts everybody in the entire state of California in a tight spot.
Well, and Californians being targeted at this point,
So
obviously.
I think we're not the only state with that issue, but pretty much any state that's pushed back on cooperation with ICE, I think it's not the same experience, right? Mostly from states, New York and Illinois, I understand are having similar problems.
And then did you say there's an NBOP thing this weekend? Saturday?
Yeah, on Saturday in the afternoon.
In the
they have an
afternoon.
annual- So Lizette and I are, she's doing the one in Missouri.
I can probably come.
And Grove, which is where that.
I'm going to the, protest.
I had a question.
She's been pointing at me because
Oh, you go.
first of all, I want to thank you for the stats on ICE contacts. That's very helpful. I just have two questions for you. And one is, what, if anything, is going on with the subpoena litigation? And the other is, what, if anything, is going on with the investigation into the killing of David charges?
Well, I don't know that I have anything new to tell you about either one of those. The appellate work is progressing. Our brief has been filed. Opposition briefs are due in a little over a month, last I checked. And other organizations that want to file runs of the court briefs, amicus briefs, have a little bit of time after that. So we probably won't have any meaningful update until we get a ruling, which I'm sure wouldn't be until maybe around the end of the calendar.
I
And
wonder, John, if everybody here knows the nickel version of that litigation, maybe, maybe not.
would you like me to give it?
Well, I don't know, does everybody know at least the highlights of what that litigation is all about?
A little bit.
Okay. So maybe we're okay then.
Okay. That's a great question you asked, though. 'Cause
Thank you.
sometimes there are items that we bring up at every meeting and maybe not everyone will remember or have been present for meetings we had 6, 8, or 9 months ago, right? The Pelias Chavez shooting, so nickel version of that, not to make that sound like not a serious matter, but, in 2022, there was, shooting involving the sheriff's office. It was covered very much in the media, and the man who was shot and died was David Pelias Chavez. We are close to being done with our investigation of that case, and I expect to see the results of that soon. Certainly this calendar year, hopefully the next few months. But I don't have any other detail I can provide to you until we're actually completely done. That is a case that your current state law is one where we can release our final report. So there will be more transparency about that case than is the situation with most of our audits. So we'll of course include that in one of these reports.
And what's the criteria for, when you can and you can't release that information?
A few years ago, there was a bill called SB 1421. There's another as well, but that was the lead bill on creating more transparency around certain kinds of investigations into the conduct of law enforcement, and had been the case in the prior 30 years or so. And that bill said that in cases where there's a use of force by law enforcement that leads to someone's death, that is something that we can disclose to the public. There are a few other categories: confirmed dishonesty, confirmed sexual assault. They're really extreme cases, so it's a very small percentage of the overall set of investigations. But it does mean that in officer or deputy involved shootings, there's now much more transparency than there used to be in the past. It's been a little while since we've talked about those rules, so perhaps when we come back with this report, we could cover those rules in a little more detail.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Would that be good?
That would be for me, yeah.
And, you know, there's been some new ones since we talked about this last, having to do with deaths in jails too.
Yeah.
So we could have a very short presentation about a very complicated area.
Yeah.
Try to make sure we're at least all up to speed.
Lieutenant Kidder, I had a question for you as far as the requests that came from ICE to the sheriff's office. It's great that you're keeping track of all that. Are you also, or is the sheriff's office keeping track of ICE operations as well? Like when there's some sort of raid or event where they're doing some sort of ICE work within the county, is that something that any body like within the county is keeping track of officially?
I don't believe so, because they're running their own entity, right? They're their own entity, and then unless it's in our facilities, they wouldn't necessarily have to report it to us if they're gonna go do something. But but I'll double check and confirm for the next meeting, but my understanding is no.
Alright.
Any interaction that we have with ICE, I was told today before this meeting that we document that, we track that, and, you know, these types of statistics and such. But if ICE is gonna go do a raid and say, you know, Healdsburg or actually, one of the last ones that I can recall was years ago in Paloma, and it did not end well, if I can recall correctly.
Right,
And it's,
I
a
remember.
lot of that was because there was no notification to local law enforcement that they were gonna do it.
Right.
So, no, my intuition said that no, they often do not.
I'm sure I know there's community organizations that are keeping track of them.
Another question? Okay, let's open it up to the public really quick.
Sorry, can I ask a quick question?
Yes, go ahead.
Lieutenant, we have done a lot of work with Misty Wood. And, because she does a lot of the outreach work for the sheriff's office. Did I hear correctly that she's moving on?
You did, yeah, and I asked her if that was something that you wanted me to announce, and she goes, I don't think anybody's gonna really want, like, you know, not care, but that's kind of how she said. And so, but no, it is not a secret, it is out, yes, she is moving on.
Right, well, I appreciated working with her and we could pass on her thing, our thanks to her for, you know, keeping us in the loop about events in the sheriff's office that we participate in.
Absolutely, no problem, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, questions from the public? Jim?
Jim Duffy, I live in Runner Park for folks who don't know. It's more a statement to John, but really aimed at the CAC members, hoping that you will agree with me and exert influence on John on this issue. I really hope you find money to do the triennial audits. Which is not news for you, me saying this to you. Measure P passed in 2020, it's a triennial audit. So 2023 would have been triennial. So we're kind of overdue for having this audit that we need to start doing. So I don't know where you're gonna find the money, but I think we do. Thanks for taking my comment.
Thank you. Any online? Okay, we'll close public comment. Thank you for the reports. So we're already 38 minutes into the meeting, so let's try to stay on topic, and move on to our business items. The first is the discussion and possible action on approving and adopting the community engagement ad hoc committee playbook / manual. And I'll turn it over to Nancy.
So this is part of the community engagement work plan, is to produce and present this to you at this meeting. The goal essentially is to underscore for all CAC members, current and future, the role of community engagement is our responsibility. That it's really a core duty of ours to get out there and engage with different community members at different levels. So in order to do that, we thought that the best way, one of the ways to do that was to provide a sort of my phone is ringing and my hearing aids. So, it's so weird. It's like the 7-second feedback on the radio or television. Anyway, so, we thought having an outline or a guide of all of the different ways that we could engage in community engagement would be a useful tool. Just as an example, when we're, one of the ad hocs is making a recommendations, part of that ought to be, how do we get that out to the public? Once it's been adopted by the CAC, whether or not the sheriff department responds to it or not, but we should be getting that out to the public. We should be thinking about who are the audiences that we want to hear that. But then look, various communities in Sonoma County would be interested in how we're gonna get that out. And also the tools that we have, the current tools that we have, are identified in here. And I think we think of this as a living document that we can modify and change over time. It's not set in stone. But we do want to have something in writing that as a current thing, the citizen members can rely on and thinking about their duties, obligations, with their student community engagement. And so we're hoping that you will discuss this if necessary in fact.
Thank you. We'll start with questions from CAC members. Any questions on the work plan, playbook / manual that was included in the packet? So I did have one. I saw there were sections where the way I read it refers to the CAC as an agency. And I, kind of thought it might sound better if we just said body or thing, because I don't, well, in my mind, I see IOLERO as the agency, but the CAC as a body. So I would, if, you agree, I would just recommend maybe changing that.
Could you provide examples?
If you look at the introduction page, 3, 4, the 5th paragraph down, start out as a civilian volunteer oversight agency.
Oh.
And then, I don't know if I missed it or it wasn't in there and maybe it, I don't know if you thought we didn't need it, but the role of the sheriff's office liaison and how maybe that could be used. I don't know if that's something we can put in there. Otherwise, I thought it was really great and this is, I think it's gonna help with a lot of our work.
Thank you. You don't need to respond to it. You know, we did not think about the sheriff liaison. I guess the only question I would have about putting this in our book is that we don't really have any power or control over a grant. Except to ask nicely. And, you know, so I'm not sure. I mean, we could certainly say that that's a means of communication, so we could have that there. But I didn't think of it because he's not part of the CAC exactly.
You know, all joking aside, you're not wrong, right? I follow the policies of my agency, so anything that we can put in here, I don't know that it would actually govern what I do, but you could absolutely, I don't see why you couldn't put in there something like, this is what we prefer, or something, you know, word it that way, like, we would love to see X, Y, and Z from the sheriff's office today. And quite honestly, you know, now that I've been here for a little bit, I think I have an idea what I'm doing, and again, I'm always open. You guys telling me that you don't want to hear any more about the community engagement or that we're doing or whatever, just let me know. But having some sort of direction, you know, if I don't have the opportunity to pass on what I'm supposed to do to the next person that's in the seat, having at least written down somewhere, I don't see why it hurt. So some sort of recommendations or what you'd like to see, preferences. You know, not only will it help me, but you know, in the future, whoever's sitting in the seat. But yeah, Nancy's correct. I don't know that I would have to abide by anything that you put that in there.
Yeah, I think that you've set a high standard, for the role that you're filling. And so maybe a lot of the times in the past, I guess we would ask questions and then we'd have to wait like a whole month to get a response. So I feel like going off what you just recommended, maybe having something in there that says what we would want to know, report wise from a liaison would help us in our communication process.
Yeah, totally. And for what it's worth, I don't know when, it could be tomorrow, it could be 2 years from now, whenever they decide that it's time for me to go, my 100% intent is to pass on what I've been doing to the next person, so it will continue to go. Unless somebody like.
We could certainly also focus on what we do in connection with you rather than what you provide us. You know, so that's how we work with you. And that's certainly within our purview.
Yeah, maybe,
Okay.
maybe you phrase it that
Got
way,
it.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was gonna right along the line with Nancy was saying, but I think it would fit well in the collaboration practices, right? There's the top of the page, CAC bridges the gap between technical policy and the series, sessions, town halls, and public resources. We have, the liaison in there, and talking about what we're doing to be on the school. They're doing, but how we intend to collaborate.
That's good. Good suggestion.
On page 2, where it says in the, I think 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th paragraph down, it says, as a civilian volunteer oversight agency, group or whatever you call yourselves, CAC faces and works through inherent challenges and has primarily limited resources. It strikes me that one of our other inherent challenges is that there's no, I mean, I understand this is part of the, the relationship between the sheriff's department and CAC, but that there's no obligation on the sheriff's, for the sheriff to even respond to, our recommendations. I think,
That's actually not true.
well,
Measure P does. say that
okay,
the
maybe
sheriff
not
should
respond, maybe respond is not the right word, but certainly to accept our recommendations. And that feels like an inherent challenge to me as part of a member of the CAC that, we can write up these beautiful reports with lots of recommendations and submit them, and we don't know, what we're gonna get back, or if we can't, you get it, I'm sure you get it.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, let's open it up to the public. And we'll do 3 minutes. Jim, anything?
Great work, thank you.
Okay, we don't have a hand raised from Barbara. Okay, so we'll close public comment and bring it back for final thoughts and a possible motion to adopt as amended.
I think Rania deserves a huge thank you for this, and acknowledgement. She did a tremendous amount of work to put this together. And I really appreciate that, her organizational skills.
Absolutely, the case. She really put the labor in more, and this would not have gotten done without.
Yeah.
And Lizette as well.
Yeah.
I think this will really help like new members when they come on to have this, because this was one of my big challenges when I started was I didn't know where we would stand with any of this, like, should we do a press release? Should we do something on the website? It was always a question every time kind of cycling through, so I think it's great to like put this on paper and really document it, and then we can, like you said, edit it, but I think this is awesome, a huge step forward. So thank you.
And it should be a quiz for all new members.
And it could be a living document where we just make updates as needed, but it's something that we can all refer to and new members can receive as part of their orientation documentation, things like that.
Mhm.
Well, do you want, since we don't have the actual language, for what we're gonna call us instead of an agency, or public council or something. And we don't have a sheriff, do you want a motion, do you want us to vote on this today, or do you want us to bring it back?
Seems like a minor edit, doesn't it? I mean,
They're minor enough, if nobody objects, let's do it tonight, but I just
Yeah.
wanted to.
Yeah.
Isn't the language to use whatever CAC, is it council or commission, whatever that final C is about, right?
Yeah, I'm just thinking more about the relationship with the sheriff.
Sure.
Yeah, okay, I'm happy to get this off the agenda here and take it back and just report it out.
I move to approve it.
I second it.
As amended, right? Or
As amended.
With the direction that we provided. Sorry. Michael, you raised your hand?
I'm sorry.
Sorry about
Probably a dumb question. If approved, this is on the website, the public can see it. Is that correct?
Yeah, it would be on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we had a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions?
Abstain, just saying, so new, I haven't had a chance to read it.
Okay, thank you. The motion carries.
What were you doing in that happen?
You're getting to know each other.
Okay, moving on to business item B. Discussion and possible action on approving the final K-9 policy recommendations ad hoc committee report. So hopefully everyone had a chance to look at the report. We'll start with questions unless you have a brief introduction to provide. Per our conversation.
Well, we can start with questions, sure.
Who wants to go first? So my, since I was volunteering, I took a lot of notes. I was a little bit confused as to what we would be approving. Like, is it all of this background about meetings and the whole project, or is it like the part that's towards the end? This page that's, like a one pager? Or,
Well, the proposal is that, the CAC adopt the report as its report. That the CAC, adopt the K-9 policy recommendations to the sheriff, which are the last 2 pages of the report. There are 8 items there and a prefatory paragraph. So that those recommendations would be made by this body to the sheriff's department. On the page after that, the one that starts, Community Advisory Council recommends changes in sheriff K-9, et cetera, that is a proposed 1-page summary of the action that could be used as a publicity type document, rather than making the thing live as a 15-page report and technical recommendations. So it would be a summary for purposes of posting on the website,
Or tabling.
cabling, sending to media outlets to summarize the action that was taken and why. So those are the things that are for approval, and then the other items after that are just evidence, so to speak, right? They're just like, here's some communications that we had with the sheriff's department on the way to this report and on the way to the final request, and then the current sheriff's department K-9 policy. So I would say that the request is approve the report, approve the recommendations, and adopt the 1-page summary for purposes of publication.
anyone else have questions right now?
And if there aren't any questions, I will say a little bit more.
So. So there is this summary here of the sheriff's response.
That is the sheriff's response.
Okay. And was there a meeting in person or was it just all 3?
No, there was no meeting.
We asked
It was, well,
I know you requested a meeting, that's why.
Yeah, we requested a meeting and that invitation was not accepted.
Did Rania help you guys with this?
Especially with the one pager, she helped more with the one page.
I would say, Ronnie, had input, yeah.
What is that? My first thought when I was reading this was that it contains a lot of the background of the work in a report that I feel like should have been left out. And I actually did something similar when we were writing ours, and then Nate's like, yeah, we should probably take out that whole page you wrote and all this other stuff, and just like the research and the back and forth with the sheriff's office, and I feel like that kind of stuff we should eliminate from the report and or from a formalized document that we're all voting on, but it could be something that you have for background, like that's what we decided to keep for ours, and the plan was if we ever needed to use that, we would have it still in our files, and it would be, you know, a public record or something that anybody can ask for. But I feel like in a formalized, adopted or approved document that we're voting on, I feel like a lot of it should be taken out, in my opinion. And then I have to go over all my little sections, but that was one of the things, which is why I asked what we were actually, or what you were expecting us to vote on tonight. And then I don't think we should include like email stuff, and I don't think we need to redact Brent's email. Cause that's available to the public, but, yes. That's all I have for now.
I just wanted to follow up on the, response to the sheriff, the sheriff's response to your report. Did that change anything in your report?
No. No, and, I'm happy to, describe why it didn't, if that would be of interest.
Well, I don't know that we need to go through each one, but if you have sort of a general thought about it, yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I would summarize what, we received back from the sheriff's department as, you know, first of all, here it is. We don't have page numbers, unfortunately. But it says across the top, SCSO response to K-9 policy ad hoc committee summary report. First of all, it's difficult for me to understand what what is being responded to in each of these numbers, because in my view, it doesn't really correlate with what's in the report. But I will say, you know, that in general, the sheriff's department it has basically said, we already made some changes based on previous communications from IOLERO, from this body, etc. And we're pretty happy with where our policy is now. We don't see any reason to make any changes. With regard to the suggestion that there be an attempt to identify the regular kinds of situations in which police dogs are released to search for and bite and hold people. There is a suggestion, which I want to go through, because I want to go through each of the recommendations. But there's a suggestion that that the policy actually anticipate and provide some structure for the various kinds of instances in which canines are released to bite people. And the sheriff's department response is, in essence, in this document, it's too complex. There's too many moving parts. Every situation is different. And so it's inappropriate to try to anticipate that and put it into policy. I disagree. These are discussions that we had hoped to have with the sheriff's department prior to bringing you a final report. For whatever reason, that didn't occur. That wasn't, that invitation was not accepted. The legislature has said comprehensive, specific policy guidance for use of force. So in my view, the response that it's too complicated, every situation is different. It can't be captured in policy is not good enough. That's not a good enough response in my view. So there are also responses in the sheriff's department document that in essence say, well, we already train for that. In other words, you know, where we've made a recommendation, they say, well, we already trained for that. We've already captured that. But the point is that there is a vast difference between training for a situation and adopting it as policy. Okay. And among the reasons are, if it's simply a part of training, and that's perfectly appropriate, of course, the problem is that it permits a lot of interpretation that makes it difficult, if not impossible, to actually uniformly enforce as policy.
Right.
And therefore, it leads to the sheriff's department, I think, responding quite often that, this was a reasonable reaction to the situation that the deputy faced. And so it was within policy and there's no basis for discipline,
Right.
for example. So, and I'll just give you an example for that, part of the sheriff's department response was, and I won't read it, I'll just summarize. Each of the teams, each of the handler canine teams is supposed to have 3 disengagement plans. In other words, one of the problems that IOLERO identified was in a couple of these meaningful cases that led to real injury. The dog didn't release for a substantial period of time and caused additional injury that wasn't required to get the job done. It wasn't required to get the person into custody. And the response here was, well, each canine handler team is supposed to have 3 different disengagement plans. And therefore, you know, between bite breaker bars and, you know, all these different things, they have a plan because that's part of their training. Well, that's precisely what ought to be in the policy, that the policy should call that out, particularly if they're training for it. In other words, they've articulated it to the level that, well, they have 3, no, don't worry about it. They have to have 3 different disengagement plans. Well, if that's in the training, the failure to adhere to that leads to not a violation of policy, but just, you know, failed to adhere to training. Those are 2 very different things. And, you know, where a particular response to an identified issue for canine handler teams has been articulated at that level, that can be put in a policy. So this notion that, well, it's too complex, it's different, it changes in every scenario, et cetera. I mean, it's sort of, the contrary is proved by the fact that, you know, this 3 different disengagement plans is what we do already. So don't worry about it, it's a lot of things to do. So what else? Yeah.
In your research, did you find a policy from anywhere, any other law enforcement that you could reference as something for them to adopt just holistically?
I would love to do that, but I gotta tell you, in California, what happens is everybody adopts the Lexipol plan, right? Lexipol, which is this industry leader in providing policies which are adopted by law enforcement agencies up and down the length of the state, and probably, I don't know this, but probably much more broadly than just in California. And, you know, the sheriff's department has adopted Lexipol policy and has done some fine tuning on it. And as we say in the report, they've adopted some stuff that made the policy better. There's no doubt about that. But there are still, in our view, some meaningful opportunities to have a better policy with more guidance that answers more questions, gives better direction to handlers and trainers, and that actually creates policy that, if not adhered to, creates a basis for discipline. So, you know, that's why we've done what we did. But, you know, to answer your question directly, no, not really. Because the Lexipol policy kind of dominates the industry.
Yeah, it's a little surprising and a little disappointing that somebody that hasn't had other canine issues within their department hasn't already had a more refined policy to be able to reference.
Agreed.
Did
That
you,
was, go ahead.
did you get the impression that the sheriff's office is moving away from canine usage? Or like, is it, like, do we get any data on like canine incidents over time? And is that something that we're seeing trending down or up or flat or?
So we did not address data in that way, but I do know that the sheriff reported to us that since, and it was some time ago.
That was at our February
Yeah.
strategic meeting, planning meeting.
Since they
Right.
made changes in their policy, they had not had any canine deployments that led to bites.
Right.
Those were changes that were maybe approaching a year old at that time.
And the impression I got in that forum was they felt like they had solved the problem, right, without saying that, but that was essentially the takeaway.
I think that, yeah, that was my takeaway from what he said too.
Okay. The only reason I bring that up is, I did have a conversation with, the SRPD chief a few months back.
Mhm.
And he was kind of mentioning basically that they were essentially moving towards a situation where they thought canines were going to be used less and less over time and replaced by something else, like maybe drones or whatever, but he was really under the impression that in law enforcement in general, the usage of canines, he anticipated was just gonna be declining in the future. So I was curious if you saw that or not.
Well, it's a very big and well-developed program that the sheriff's department has, and, you know, so we attended a training session at the, I don't know what you call that facility, the North County facility where they train. What was that called?
It's if my memory serves me correctly, it was the North County Detention Facility.
Okay. So they were using that for training, and we went and saw a demonstration, I would say. And there were, you know, a number of animals and a number of canine handler teams, and there were deputies that were there who were preparing to step into future roles as they became available. I mean, there's, it's not surprising there are a number of deputies who are interested in becoming a part of a canine, handler team. So they had people in the pipeline. And so, no, I did not have any, I didn't have any take that there was gonna be any, reduction in it.
Gotcha, okay.
When I was reading through it, I asked myself a similar question to John Azevedo, like, which policies did you look at? Cause you just mentioned numerous canine policies, and I can't remember why I looked up Napa County, and then, oh, I was looking at something, comparing our current canine policy in this section on it to a different county. And I always think of Napa as like similar to Sonoma in a way. But even though it's a lexical policy, it's not, they're not the same. Or I guess a lot of it is the same, but there's some stuff that's not in their policy that is in Sonoma County's policy. So I feel like maybe there's ways to do some more comparing to see if there's anything that might differ, even though it's a lexical policy from one agency that maybe we don't have in ours that could be considered. That was just a thought that I had. There was one statement on here that I kind of thought we in a way seem like we were, and I'm saying we because this is gonna get adopted by us, so. But I guess I'll say, when you guys wrote this, under section 1, after, on letter C. Where it's talking about Gabriel and the carjacking. There's a sentence that says the deputy ordered the dog to bite Mr. Gabriel, not based on any identified threatening movement, but because he was looking around and perhaps formulating a plan to resist. I kind of felt like that kind of jumped to a conclusion. And I feel like maybe that should be taken out because it's like our own interpretation of something that occurred that we weren't present for. That was just my feeling on that. And then,
Or is that from the deputy?
That's actually from the IOLERO audit. That was what we opined about.
oh, is it,
So that's
I feel like it's
repeating
not.
IOLERO's perspective. Which. was
IOLERO
articulated over
concluded.
Several pages, so it's much longer than you see there.
Okay, so maybe it's just how I read it, that it just sounded like we were interpreting that, but. Okay, and then,
So John's right, that this is a paraphrase of the IOLERO audit and the IOLERO audit's conclusions about the facts as the auditor understood them.
okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
I'm with you though. I agree with you. I think we shouldn't be doing that. I mean, IOLERO can do whatever they want, but I think it's really smart to be sensitive to that.
Yeah,
The
but
way
it's
it looks.
part of the IOLERO, report.
Totally. No, yeah, but
That's data that
Put it
we.
in
but is it
Yeah.
paragraph?
Put it in
Just put it
quotes
close,
and
yeah.
find out how to learn.
Yeah, I think that would help, because I think the way I read it, it just seemed like it was us making that interpretation. And then there's other sections where I wrote comments, like I really liked, or that are good, but I'll go into some other ones that I wrote as questions. So under F, canine policy fails to describe when a canine must be ordered to release a suspect. It's like that big bolded section. Are there any techniques out there where it says, the policy says nothing about which body parts a dog must not be permitted to bite, nor does it provide guidance about techniques or tools a handler must use when the canine does not release the suspect. Are there any techniques out there that you might have found anywhere that we could provide as examples? Cause I like this and I think it should be included, but then I feel like sometimes you have to be more persuasive to the sheriff. If
So
there's something that exists, maybe we can point it
there's
out.
yes, bite breaker bars that they use to pry the mouth, electronic collars, which they use to control the dog or to perhaps, make it release. I mean, these are things that are in the sheriff's department response to this. So, they're calling out from their practice some of the tools. But what they don't have is the tools in their policy. And so rather than act as though I or we are experts in this area, what we are suggesting is that this be called out as something that they need to articulate and put in their policy. And, they've identified some tools that they use. And really, I think the thrust of this is, well, that belongs in your policy. That this is what you do when a dog fails to release. You use these tools. Here they are, that become a part of the policy rather than a training matter. For the reasons that I talked about before.
Can I ask, in your research, did you look at other agencies' policies throughout the state? And if you did you find the specific verbiage that you're looking for?
I read several.
And did you ever find
No.
any of them?
No. I didn't, and that's really interesting because what we have is the sheriff's department saying, here are the tools that we use. But it's not in the policy. So there hasn't been an attempt, in my view, in law enforcement in general, there hasn't been an attempt to say, oh, okay, we're supposed to give comprehensive, specific guidance on this issue to our canine handlers in our policy. That's what the legislature has told us. And yet that's not been a policy matter, even though it's trained for. It's trained for, but it's not a policy matter.
And Casey, I think it might be useful to add that the legislation you're referring to is only 3 years old.
Yeah.
Relatively new.
Right.
And then when you look at some of the other canine policies, like LA Sheriff's Department's from 2024, LA Police Department's from 2011, so way before this sort of, Oakland Police Department has one, but it's also before this policy, this rule became part of state law. So a lot of the canine policies that are out there on larger agencies on their own, instead of using lexical, predate this requirement. So there's being on Scott.
Sure, understood. Yeah, and honestly, from the time that we started working on this and, have had this discussion, it's like, we don't run canine handler teams. That's not what we do. But what we can do is members of the community is to find things that it looks like we should be asking our sheriff's department to actually think hard about how can this be made a part of policy, rather than us saying, oh yeah, and we know how it should be. And here's the language, that's not us, I don't even think that's our role. I think our role is much better to say, we really think you need to look at this. We think this is missing and here's why. And I do want to actually talk about the recommendations so that I can speak to that in a little bit more detail.
So I'm just standing up because I can't say.
So do you want
Me
to
too.
go over the recommendations
I-
then?
I
Cause
would
I
love
did
to.
have a suggestion for number one, that's literally based. I'll just say it before you go into it. So for the first one where you said adopt a mission statement. I kind of thought that maybe we could recommend to use the bullet points 1 and 2 from the response question 8 from the communications made in February 2025 that were received from the sheriff's office. Maybe that can be added to 309.1 purpose and scope. And that was their own response to you guys. Where is that? Oh, where it says Sonora County Sheriff responses to K-9 policy ad hoc recommendations on question 8. Their first 2 bullet points say our mission statement aligns with blah, 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 and maybe adding some of that, their own statements to you. And they can consider incorporating that somehow. Now that, I'll let you continue.
Yes, okay, so, a mission statement, that, recognizes, that canines that are released to bite people hurt them. And sometimes do permanent damage to them. And that describes to the community, why canines are required for the sheriff's department to do the public safety work that they do. And why that balance means that canines are a useful tool that the sheriff's department is going to use judiciously and for the purpose and the purpose alone, and is going to govern, I think is a good idea. I think would be a good approach to a mission statement. But again, this is just a summary of the kinds of things that would be good to address. How SCSO ensures that canine force is appropriately limited and controlled to ensure public safety and minimize injury. The policy doesn't do that at this point. You know, we can certainly look at it, but it doesn't say that.
Can I interrupt before we go any further?
Mhm.
I am totally lost in all the paperwork. And I'm hoping that other people either have found where you're talking from or are okay about it, but could we just, I know it's not, there's not page numbers, but maybe we could point to
Sure.
a specific first sentence?
Yes.
First headline, something
Yes.
like that.
Of course. At the bottom of the page, that is 2 pages from the end of the report, it says CAC K-9 policy recommendations to sheriff. 2 pages from the end of the report. Unfortunately, there's a lot of material behind that. Has everybody found that? It looks like this.
Number all the pages.
Looks like this.
Let's see. He's on a different page than you are. I think he was on that page that I
CAC
like.
K-9 policy recommendations to
Is
sheriff.
it this one that says A, current policy 309 lacks any strategic mission statement recognizing and balancing injury canine?
No, that's the
No, look
report.
at, Nancy, look for
That's
this.
the
Look for
report.
this
Now
at the
the
bottom and go to the-
recommendations.
Go to the next page.
It's, this is way, I can't vote on this tonight. I will just say that right now. This is, I do not. I will not vote on this tonight because I don't understand what we're trying to do here. I would be happy to help you reorganize this, to make it understandable to me, but tonight I'm not gonna vote on it. But you
Okay.
can continue to talk about it.
All right. So can you look at the recommendations though while we talk about them?
Yeah, so
but
I
we're looking
turned
at
her
a
to
different
this.
page than you are.
And then where you're listing 1 through 8,
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay,
She's right. Next
that's
page.
the spot.
Yep.
Okay,
Okay,
so, there is a prefatory paragraph, that says, why we're giving recommendations. The first recommendation is adopt the mission statement. The second recommendation is define key terms that are currently undefined in the policy, including those set forth in this report. So there's a whole laundry list of terms in the policy that are never defined anywhere that we think should be defined, or else the policy is extremely squishy and subject to misinterpretation. Recommendation number 3 is require canine specific de-escalation, proportionality, and crisis intervention protocols, tactics, and techniques. The current policy does not use the words de-escalation or proportionality or crisis intervention. Recommendation number 4 is describe permissible tactical purposes for deploying a dog to bite and apprehend a suspect. The reason that is in there is because what the policy does now is it says if a person presents a threat, an animal may be used to bite them. But it doesn't say what the purpose of biting them is. It doesn't say what is to be achieved by biting them. It doesn't say that distraction. It doesn't say ensuring that the person is not armed. It doesn't say controlling them for purpose of handcuffing. So there's no part of the current policy that says, here are acceptable tactical reasons to have a dog bite a suspect. Okay. That should be a part of the policy. Again, with regard to calling the animal off, if you don't have a tactical goal for releasing the animal to bite, how do you know when it's time to call the animal off? So those considerations should be called out with specificity in the policy. State actions, the handler, number 6 now. State actions the handler must take when canine does not release bite on command. In the current policy, it says nothing about how a handler must disengage and what to do if an animal is failing to disengage. And in fact, a couple of these IOLERO audits that we talked about earlier were this very thing. The inability to compel the dog to disengage. That needs to be a part of the policy. 7, there are specific predictable factual scenarios when law enforcement officers use animals in the field. There are certain situations. there are armed people, there are people thought to be armed, there are concealed people, etc. There is no attempt to identify, here's what we do when we face a suspect in this setting, or in this setting, or in this setting. And so, you know, again and again, it's left to the discretion of the handler how to deal with that, rather than providing the kind of structure that would create some predictability and better trainability. So that's why describing tactics for predictable factual scenarios is included in the recommendations. And finally, providing a clear admonition that violations of the canine policy will subject handler to discipline, as would any other violation of force policy. So those are the 8 recommendations. I totally hear you that Nancy, that it's confused. This document is confusing for you. That's too bad. I wish that it wasn't confusing. But the recommendations, I think, are useful and important. If you want to make a recommendation that the CAC do something else on different timing, we should entertain that.
So here's.
Because I want your support.
I would suggest that we move to adopt those 8 recommendations. And that we not adopt any of the rest of this, and the rest of this becomes the appendix. And it is, but the recommendations are what we are adopting. And then the report, and the report needs to be, you know, that all sort of needs to be reworked so that it makes actual sense. As you can follow it, and I think that the lack of page numbers exacerbated the problem. I mean, I went through this several times and had trouble trying to figure out exactly what I needed to actually pull out of this for purposes of voting on it. So that's what I would suggest. We take the recommendations, that's the cover. We have the other documents behind as appendices, and I'm happy to vote on the recommendations tonight. If you'll let me take a little stab at reorganizing the report.
Can I just, what do you think about having this 1-page summary precede the recommendations, just because it references the California law and it talks about the comprehensiveness, the specificity that's required, and it does give some context for the recommendation. I think that's just having the recommendation does not necessarily give the context. Yeah, that, I'm talking about that page.
Yeah.
It's the next page, Nancy, after the recommendation. John has it. Just look at what John has.
I think the 1-pager exec summaries are really helpful.
Yeah.
And I like having them in the beginning as well.
Can I just ask a clarifying question as well?
Sure.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding your statement here. Yep, I just want to make sure I heard you right. Did you say that nowhere in our canine policy it mentions that, you know, someone that's armed or potentially armed or anything like that? Is that what your statement was?
No,
Okay.
no, not at all.
So what exactly were you talking about?
The recommendation is that the sheriff's department anticipate different scenarios and provide guidance for those scenarios. In other words, suspect known to be armed, barricaded suspect, right? These are things that you run into. Suspect known or believed to be unarmed, etc. So that there is some actual structure to the way, the officers go at training and are held to standards, for those different scenarios.
So something more specific than section 309.6, the apprehension guidelines?
Yeah.
In the policy, because I mean, it does mention, suspect has committed or is about to commit crimes. Suspect poses an imminent threat of violence, suspect is violently resisting, and canine appears to be necessary to overcome such resistance. The suspect is in possession of a weapon and likely to cause serious bodily injury. So it does mention those general possibilities or potential situations where a canine might be used. So I just want to make sure that that is in there. It's just not as specific as you'd like.
So, for example, nowhere does it say, here's what we do with a barricaded armed suspect. Here's the protocol that we follow. That's just an example.
That may be in our barricaded subjects policy.
Well, but the canine is a different thing, right? That introduces an entirely different set of factors into dealing with a barricaded person, just for example.
Correct, but I want, maybe I'm just assuming that the knowledge is out there, and so I'll clarify. So when we have situations in law enforcement, and it's it's a barricaded situation where a canine may be used, right? Likely to, lead to a use of force. Just because it's a canine situation, doesn't mean it's just the canine policy. All the other policies are in effect, right? So the barricaded subject would be in effect. The use of force policy would be in effect. The canine policy would be in effect. Critical incident policy may be in effect if it turns into that situation. So just because it may not be listed in here that, canines and barricaded subjects, specifically in the canine policy, it may be addressed in the barricaded hostage policy. And did we look at that?
Well, that doesn't talk about how to use a canine in a barricaded situation.
Right, but if in the barricaded subject policy, it allows the use of a canine, well, then we revert back to the canine policy where it sets out these guidelines.
I think Casey's point is neither the barricaded subject policy nor the canine policy says how you use a canine.
Is that right? It's in the, you check barricaded
I
subject.
think that's true, yeah.
So you okay.
This is why it would have been good for you guys to meet.
Meet with the sheriff.
Just
Exactly.
want to point that out.
Exactly.
We know it's not necessarily your decision.
Great.
So, yeah, I think based on what I've heard, that rather than just take action on their recommendations tonight, because I feel like we might have a little bit more work to do,
I think so.
honestly, to create some clarity. So I would say we should bring this back for action in the future. This has got to look different. And it will look different when you see it again. And yeah.
Page numbers.
On that, you said, and correct me if I misheard you, our response, the SCSO's response to your report was difficult for you to follow as well.
It was, yeah.
So if I can have the team rearrange that to address the specific recommendations, would that help you? And then maybe factor in some of the comments that they had into this report?
Of course,
Especially now that we have a little
absolutely.
bit more time, because I know we were pressed for time on the last one.
And we're, well, I mean, we're still delighted to sit down and meet too, Brent, as you know.
Oh, I do.
Yeah, so,
And we won't take their overtime.
yeah, if they were directed specifically at the recommendations, sure, that would be even more useful.
But that would come in time because these aren't even being, we're not going to approve them tonight, any part of this tonight.
No.
Yeah, right.
Withdrawn.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we still have to take public comment and finish up the item, but I was going to, suggest that maybe we include some examples, of things that you're referring to, like, for, recommendation 7, where you say specific factual scenarios, and I feel like we can't account for everything, and if there's a similar policy that maybe isn't canine related, where a law enforcement department lists out factual scenarios for however they're supposed to use a weapon or something, like detailed how you're expecting to have for canine, I think it would be good to show that, even if it's not canine related. I just feel like none of the policies that they have are very detailed to what we think would be great to have, but I don't even know if, or I've never seen one where it just lists that much factual, predictable, I mean, the word predictable too. I feel like when you do the, what is that thing where,
Yeah, the simulator,
yes,
yeah,
like
yeah.
there's so much that you can't even plan for, or that you don't plan for, and anything can come up. And I can't recall if it was Brandon Cutting who told us that the policies are never detailed, but sometimes the procedures and the stuff they use in the trainings are, because you can't incorporate anything that could happen in a policy, then you'd have like a super long policy, so maybe we should keep that in mind.
I agree.
And then I don't know if I mean, the military also uses police, or canines. So I don't know if there's anything that they use, or if law enforcement departments have mentioned, using any of the same tactics or policies or anything like that, that maybe the military details in a way that we could recommend, even if no one has adopted anything through Lexipol that you're looking for. I mean, we could always be the first. I mean, I think you guys have really great ideas, and I agreed on a lot of, I like the idea of defining terms, and I just think some of these are very difficult to incorporate into a policy. So maybe one thing that could come out of this is that if it's not incorporated into a policy, it could be recommended to incorporate in their trainings, if it's not done already, or whatever documentation and procedures they use when they are conducting canine trainings and things like that. That could be another thing that comes out of it. It doesn't necessarily have to be that you're only recommending policy changes. But I do think that this needs a little bit more work, and I was a little bit confused as to what we were adopting, but I think you guys did a lot of great work, but we there's a little bit more that needs to be done.
Clearly,
in my opinion.
there's a lack of clarity and caused confusion. And so, yeah, we'll restructure this and bring it back on a future date.
Great, yeah.
Yeah, I
I
tend to
did
think,
look at the policy itself and wrote a whole bunch of questions on there, so maybe I could
Your
share
questions
those
aren't
with
bad.
you separately.
Well, to be fair, I mean, it was a very narrow bore. By the time we determined what we were gonna propose, it was about apprehension. You know, the canine policy has got a lot of stuff in it about how they do what they do, how they document what they do, et cetera, et cetera. It's too big, too much, too many things. So it was really about apprehension, and it was driven by these 3 events where there was trouble with the apprehension.
Yeah.
That, you know, the thought was that more structure would be better. We're not in a position to tell the sheriff's department how to do what they do with their canines. But we are in a position to say, it seems like this is missing. It seems like this is missing. It seems like the policy would be better if it had this in it, for example. So that was the approach. But anyway, we will refine this will make it easier to understand visually and conceptually, and we'll bring it back.
Well, thank you. And one thing that did pop into my head when I was reading your guys' report and then looking at the policy, under 309.6.2 warnings and announcements, it just says a clear audible announcement that a canine will be used if the suspect does not surrender, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, it's blah, blah. What is a reasonable time? And one of the examples that you guys looked at, a canine was released after 7 seconds, I think you wrote, so that doesn't sound like a reasonable time to me, so I feel like that could be something that's also explained somehow. At what point do you announce and then wait and then release a canine?
To be fair, I don't want to leave it hanging out there. That scenario you're talking about, announcements were being made for almost a minute.
Hmm.
Then one of the two people who was hidden came out. Then 7 seconds later, the canine was released. So I didn't want to leave that hanging out there in this room. There was announcements that lasted nearly a minute prior to the one person coming out. 7 seconds later, the canine was released.
Okay. Thank you.
I kind of foresee to like, one of the groups that we're talking to through this policy, obviously as a community, but if there were another incident, canine incident, it's the press, right? Like the press is gonna come back and read this. And then they're gonna say, on this date that, the IOLERO CAC recommended these things, had they been in place, this maybe could have been prevented. So that's the other consumer of this policy that I think we should keep in mind when we're writing it up. And I do think a lot of these things look good. Item 7 to me is a bridge too far. So I would strike that, to be honest, but everything else, I think, it looks really good. And there's a lot of good stuff in here, and the key terms, I can't believe those aren't defined.
I think that's exactly what you're saying, reasonable. It's throughout the whole policy, it's so subjective, the decision to deploy a dog. And so many of these terms are like reasonable are just not defined, so they get to decide on the spot what they're gonna do, and it doesn't seem like it's following protocol.
Yeah. Okay.
Reasonable means.
Okay, so now we're gonna open it up to public comment. So you have 3 minutes. Jen, do you have anything?
Yeah, I just want to say, I think you guys did phenomenal work. I really want to thank the ad hoc for everything you've done. And I'm really happy to see that a dialogue is starting back up, because the best policies come when the CAC is in dialogue with the sheriff's office. And whenever that dialogue has been interrupted for whatever reason is when the CAC has come out with, they still come out with recommendations. But when I served on it, we got interrupted a few times for reasons that made no sense to me. But they're crappy recommendations because they're ill-informed. And so it makes no sense for the sheriff's office not to talk to this body, because they have no power. All they can do is recommend. Means they go jump in the lake, so, that's my comment. Thanks for taking it.
Thank you. Any other comments? No comments from attendees online, so we'll close public comment. Thank you, guys, and then let us know when you're ready to bring it back for consideration.
Will do.
I just want to add to Jim and Lorena, you guys did a lot of work, and it's very much appreciated. My frustration with the organization aside, this is really a lot of work that you put into it, and I want you to know that I read it myself.
And that's why we were coming prepared to this meeting too, reading the report. Because it is a lot of work, and it's taken out a lot of time, and that's kind of how it is for all of our ad hocs. So when you put something together, we should all come to a meeting prepared to discuss, and then these kinds of conversations help to get the kind of product that you're looking for.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to unless you guys all want to do the working meeting, we can. We can table that, to the next meeting and proceed to item 9, CAC committee reports. And we'll start with community engagement. Is there anything to report?
Thank you for your support.
Well, and I would say that a connection has been made with a couple more organizations like NAACP and to set up a meeting.
And Lucian.
And Lucian, yeah, that's happening. Yeah, so we're still working on that, but we have gotten some responses from our outreach.
Thank you. Racial and Identity Profiling Act.
Yeah, so we, I think it was last week or the week prior, we had a very productive meeting with the sheriff. In person, lasted about an hour. We basically presented the recommendations. It was myself, both Johns, and Lorena were there, and we kind of went over the recommendations and just discussed with Sheriff Ingram, you know, his kind of thoughts, and he also had a person who had read everything over and had kind of written responses, and he was reading some of those back to us. You know, I'd say the lead of the story essentially is that they agreed to adopt a policy and work with us in developing that policy. So that was like, you know, high level success. They pushed back on some of our other recommendations for various reasons that were all like valid and made a lot of sense. Lorena took really amazing notes, and typed those all out and like, you know, sent those earlier. And we also are having a similar challenge as you guys had, where we have, you know, this report, this recommendation report, and then we have all this other material, but we're not totally sure where to put it. So that might be something to discuss. You know, I think, you know, like some sort of cloud storage like Google or whatever, you know, with the report reference, because we also have kind of notes to our future CAC selves about what we'd like to do for the next RIPA report, which is probably going to be a year and a half, 2 years out, to be honest. But that was sort of the, I don't know, executive summary of what happened. Did I miss anything?
He said he'll get back to us in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
On providing an update on what he's done based off what we discussed at the meeting.
We might follow up with the recommendation of the state report as well.
That's right.
So,
yeah,
some of the questions they ask or don't ask.
Yeah, RIPA and the consortium too. Right, that's good. Thank you for mentioning that.
I have a question. Do you, can you come up with a 1-page summary report, at some point that we could use in community engagement, you know, to hand out and at our tabling
I
events?
think you already have that. I think there's an exec summary on there already. So yeah, we could just give that to you, or you could print it out. We'll make sure you have it, but I think that already exists. Yeah.
Okay, policy recommendations review K9, any other?
We could go back over this.
I'm sorry. Okay, moving on, community engagement about ICE.
How do you report on your email?
This thing.
I know, but what, I'm.
So Robin sent an email to Brent asking for a meeting.
Oh, that's right. We did send an email to Brent asking for, right, a meeting to discuss our work plan and our SMART goals in particular, right?
Correct. I don't see why a meeting wouldn't be able to happen. I know in your email too, you also, I actually was a little unclear, and so that's why I waited until tonight to talk to you. So at first was do you want to have a contact person at the sheriff's office that's kind of assigned to this ad hoc? And then request a meeting, or you just flat out request?
No, when I said contact person or representative or whatever I said, I meant just, you know, whoever you thought would be the appropriate person for us to be talking to.
Gotcha.
That's what I meant.
All right.
I didn't think that I should dictate who that person would be, or our ad hoc should be who that person.
And then going over your work plan, especially the SMART goals. In increasing transparency is the first goal, yeah?
Yeah.
Between the sheriff's office and ICE. A lot of it, well, I kind of did that today, right? And that's kind of exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah. that was
Yes,
one of
and
the-
that's one, you know, your report is one of them, and, you know, then we had other ideas for, you know, how that transparency could also be.
Exactly, and then that goes to like number two, where you're improving the public access via the website, right? Posting what I just said tonight onto our website.
Okay.
And then also, I think you wanted two of our links in bold, right, on the website.
Mhm.
Okay. We acknowledge that our website is not the best it can be and are in the process of revamping it. It's going out for RFP this summer.
Uh-huh.
And so the whole entire website is gonna get redone. And so we're not gonna update the website now just to have it redone again. What I can do is, well, as John had stated earlier, Misty is now gone. She kind of runs the website. She's moving on. So whoever fills that spot or has that responsibility,
Uh-huh.
I can make these recommendations to them
Uh-huh.
and say, hey, can you make these links, whether more visible? I have a feeling the new website is gonna be just a lot more user friendly in and of itself anyway, because ours is so.
Well, I think one of our concerns would be that if that is, you know, a future thing that's happening, it's great that you're doing it, but ICE's, you know, ICE's actions now are of utmost concern to a lot of people. So to wait for 2 or 3 or 4 months for that information to be available through the sheriff's office to the community, I think is waiting longer than we would like to see. And so I think part of the conversation would be how else can we get that information out?
So the other way to get that information, especially on a monthly basis, would be through PRA for the month prior. And that same information is actually published to the website, but it's on a yearly basis. It's not broken down per month.
What's a PRA?
Public Records Request, Public Records Act request.
Oh, like FOIA kind. Okay.
And so you're,
That is publicly available already. Again, because we're doing our website, they're not gonna create a link to take us there. However, per the State Bill 54, the CARES Act, that there's once a year, the sheriff's office has to report to the board of supervisors about these interactions. The information and that presentation is posted on the website already.
So, you know, one of the alternatives, Brent, is for us to publish it in our newsletter, but we didn't want to be publishing your data in our newsletter without talking to you about it.
No.
So that's, you know, I mean, if we have to put in multiple requests every month for the PRA, or we could take the information you said, give to us here and publish it in the next newsletter. As Sheriff's Office reported at the last CAC meeting.
So yeah, another one of the recommendations was to providing a link from the IOLERO CAC website and the newsletter to the Sheriff's Office resources, right? So,
right.
and so when I talked to CEO Wood about that, he said, listen, if that link is published on our website, as long as IOLERO and the CAC are good with it being on the website, go ahead. Okay. Yeah, by all means.
I've done it already.
There we go.
Thank you.
I think,
And then any other,
yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
was just say, I think our concern was that on the website, when we went to go look for it, and we kind of knew where to look and what we were looking for. We had a hard time finding it and identifying the information that was accurate. We were on the call together and we're like, which one is it? So if we were looking for it and we knew where to look for it, and it wasn't easily accessible information, we were thinking, I think there was 2 documents that we said, well, those should be bolded because those are what people are looking for, right? When we refer people to it. Otherwise, they blend it in and we had to go to like every link to try to find out which document. And I think that's what we meant by bolding it. If people that are kind of knowledgeable about what to look for and where to look for it couldn't find it or couldn't find it easily, we figured people from the community that would probably never find it.
No, I get it, and again, we acknowledge that our website is not the best it can be, and are unfortunately in the slow process of revamping.
and I, let's see if I can- I was just going to say that I think you guys can continue this conversation between the ad hoc and Lieutenant Kidder separately, because it is 8 o'clock. And I think you'll get more details in that way and then can report back at the next meeting. That's okay.
Yeah, I just wasn't clear on whether you thought that this was in lieu of hearing that this substituted for the meeting.
No.
Okay.
No,
Oh,
I-
okay.
We can
Then
still
I'm
put
fine.
put together a meeting. I think I know who the right person is, and so
Okay.
I'll set it up.
We don't have to have a conversation.
I'll do my best to set it up.
Right, okay.
Recent history.
Moving on to open time for public comment for any non-action items from this agenda or for items not appearing on the agenda that are within the subject matter of the CAC. No comment, no hands raised. Okay, we'll close that out. Request for future agenda items. So our next meeting is going to be in August. Does anyone have any requests at this time? If not, then when John, Lizette, Nancy and I meet, maybe we'll just send out a reminder or a request for any requests. If there are any, and then we'll go from there. CAC announcements.
So there is between June 19th and July 4th, there is what's called a Freedom Festival, that is gonna be online, it's a virtual event. And on June 18th, I think it is, it can't be less than 19th, June 27th. Clean is going to have a 1 hour webinar on how accountability and transparency with law enforcement is a way of having freedom.
Oh.
So just wanted to announce that.
So this
And I
is,
can send out the
yeah,
details.
you'll send out, good.
Thank you.
One more, please sign up.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna send it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I haven't already signed up. Make sure that salmon colored paper, make sure that I put your name down. Discussion of possible topics to publicize. So I was going to ask if it would be okay to publish those numbers that you provided. For us, or.
My understanding
you
is
want-
the public information.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, cool. Thank you. Does anyone have any other ideas on what we can publicize?
Was what my suggestion was.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay, that was it. So our next Community Advisory Council meeting will be Wednesday, August 13th, and it will be in this room. Thank you all for being here tonight. We will adjourn at 8:02 p.m.